Hold up, did somebody say Crusader? Ladies, gentlemen, and Herodrum of all ages, even a month in with Diablo 4, new things are happening constantly. We have a developer update stream coming in a couple of days, which should be full of info on Season 1, including quite likely an actual date for when it will be happening, but given that I will be talking about that in all of its detail when it happens, I thought it a good idea first to go over some of the news from the last few days in the Diablo 4 community, rather than just slip it in at the end of the Season 1 stream vid when we all know that we're just there for the Season 1 info. That said, in the last few days there has been a little bit of rumblings in the community, some reaction to the recent hotfix, and also the findings of an undocumented change within that hotfix that also affects a surprising amount of players, actually giving them a small buff. Outside of that, we're going to be talking about cellars, about rats of all things as well, about the Book of Lorath that released alongside Diablo 4 and how it could have implications on the future of our travels through possible expansions for the game, the possibility of some old game files indicating a potential new class, and then a secret of nightmare dungeons that could genuinely get you killed in the silliest ways possible. Without further ado then, let's talk about the recent hotfix that hit just before the weekend. It claimed to fix some of the crashing that had been happening to a lot of PC players since 1.03 released, which was the major patch that hit a week ago, and well, for me and many others, it actually seems like the crashing has maybe even gotten worse since the hotfix. Not sure what is causing it, I don't know the inner workings of the game, but it also isn't my job to know, so all I can say is, hey, this is still a problem. It might even be more of a problem than it was before, so maybe just please take another look at it, alright? You know, if you don't mind. Aside from that, we also found out that there was a pretty notable undocumented buff within this hotfix. Not even something left out of the main patch itself, but specifically only in the hotfix. It simply increased the lucky hit chance of Rogue's Death Trap ability twice over, from 4% all the way up to 8%. This is interesting to me. Death Trap is already part of some extremely strong Rogue builds, one that is arguably the best currently, so buffing that in any way is a pretty big power move from the devs, but I just find it interesting that they didn't tell us that this happened and thought it was worth sharing it with you all, especially for the rogue mains out there who will actually be happy about this. Past that, we actually have no real updates from the devs themselves, not much communication over the weekend, and well, that's because it was July 4th weekend. I'm not American myself, but I know a lot of the devs are, and of course I understand that they are going to be taking a bit of a break from work as a result. I hope they've all managed to enjoy themselves a little bit and get some relaxation in this time. That said, there are some interesting things happening within the community itself in this time. Over the past few days, there has been some increasingly worrying number of players grabbing onto a conspiracy theory within the game. That theory, if there is a rat in your dungeon, follow it and kill the enemies that it runs towards, and they will give you better loot. This is obviously quite silly, at least to me. Personally, I don't put any credence into it. The rats run at random. They're running from you. You just start killing more mobs than you normally would be because you're killing anything that it runs towards, and thus increasing your drop rates as a result of that, but I mean, that's just my opinion, right? A surprising amount of people seem to genuinely believe that this is increasing the quality of the loot drops. It's caught on to the point where this user on Reddit literally just posted the title, "I followed the rats," with a screenshot of a unique, and hey, I mean, if it works for you, then it works. That's fine, but personally, when I'm farming loot, I just kill anything in the dungeon anyways. I just thought this was funny. Maybe you want to try it for yourself, maybe it's just a good laugh, but I always like talking about it when stuff like this happens in the community. That said, we should talk about this other Reddit user who, I kid you not, completed 1,270 cellars over the course of 3 days. Why did they do this? I don't really know. They wanted to try doing different activities for a bit, and they decided that the best one to do was the road less traveled, cellars. Since the release of the game, everyone has been pretty much on the same page that cellars are just genuinely not worth your time in Diablo 4. Low monster density, 2 loading screens, no significant rewards, pretty simple. But in all honesty, how do we really know for sure unless we check? So this player did every single cellar in the game 10 times each to test them out properly and come back with some findings to share with the rest of us. They did 1,270 cellars, and in that massive amount, they only found the butcher 3 times, which is actually really surprisingly low to me. They found the treasure goblin variation of a cellar 7 times, which again is a pretty low rate. They collected 6,352 obols, which is a sadly low amount, got 13 uniques, which is not bad, I guess, 200 legendaries, which is a bit low considering, 82 million experience, which is a really big number in itself until you remember the context of almost 1,300 cellars and 3 days of work to get that, and then about 80 million gold, which again is a pretty low reward for that time. Their summary: basements are maximum useless as a type of activity. It is slow for experience, slow for resources, slow for legendaries and uniques, and honestly for any type of currency in the game. They're just bad. Cellars are bad. There are 127 cellars in the game, and unless you just want to experience them for the sake of doing it, they are totally not worth doing over anything else else in the game. I applaud the absolute resilience of this player to check this out with this much just dedication, putting in a mammoth amount of effort to, well, confirm what we already thought to be the case.
But why?
I don't know.
On top of that, this seems as good a time as any to warn players about, well, this room. This can appear sometimes in a cellar. It is a puzzle. If you step on the wrong answer, it just straight up kills you. Again, cellar rewards are not great, so generally this is not worth your time or your life, and especially if you are a hardcore player with permadeath on, if you see this puzzle, you should probably just turn around and walk out. I mean, imagine losing a level 99 hardcore character to standing on the wrong rune. That would be a big whoopsie. Past that, we have the existence of this book that released alongside Diablo 4, Diablo Book of Lorath. This takes place mostly after the story. Spoiler alert here for things ahead. Once we reach the end of the story itself, the cathedral turns on the Herodrum and take over the Herodric Vault. So Lorath, in lore, writes this book to preserve the knowledge of the Herodrum for future generations, and ideally also to give to Neyrelle if he can find her. This documents his journeys as well post-story, in which he is trying to find her. Last time we talked about this overlaid map of the Diablo 4 playable area over the known map of Sanctuary as a whole, and talked about what this could mean as far as explorable areas for future expansions. And this all actually sort of ties together. Thanks to this book, we know that the body of water Neyrelle crossed in the ending cutscene was actually in fact the Twin Seas, which brings her to the western continent. Lorath lost her trail there after searching around a bit, but his ending location in the book, the last place that we know that he is actually Jiansai, the northernmost island in Sanctuary, notable as being the place where the wizard character in Diablo 3 was from. Being that this is where the book ends, that means it's not unlikely that we'd pick up the trail from there a year down the line or so in an expansion perhaps, and so we may well be heading specifically to Jiansai ourselves. On top of that, as far as expansion information, we also have this somewhat but not really data mine from a Reddit user that, despite being 13 days old, only recently started picking up some steam and getting attention. This states that they had a look at some of the game files. Inside of here there was specifically a list of skill categories and types, essentially the types of modifiers that you'd find on gear or on passive and skill trees, referring to a specific type of skill. Lightning skills, death skills, blood skills, all common stuff, you get the idea. The thing is, there are two specific nods in here that are not a part of current classes in the game. There is a grain of salt to take with this, of course, as some of these files were in the game as far back as 2019, so they could have just been something that was experimented with for a little bit and then dropped, or alternate names for things that we now have in other names. But again, one category was skill Ancient, and one was skill Justice. Ancient could refer to anything, really, let's be honest, but Justice seems specifically like it would link to one well-known Diablo archetype, the Crusader, and Ancient can fit in quite well with that too. This isn't, of course, by any means proof of the return of a Crusader in the future, but pieces are starting to add up, especially as there is only one class currently in the game that can use a shield, so adding in another one sort of just makes sense just a little bit, you know? I'd love for this to happen. I love the Crusader class personally, but only time will tell on that front if this will actually happen. Finally then is just another little warning, this time for Nightmare Dungeons, and it's the fact that the little critters that walk around the Nightmare Dungeons actually benefit from the affixes of the dungeon. Things like little harmless snakes, or deer, or rabbits, or, well, the rats that I mentioned earlier. If you're in a dungeon with Death Pulse as an affix, for example, and kill one of these, well, it'll release a Death Pulse. On a particularly high tier Nightmare Dungeon, these are pretty much lethal, so all of this just to say, be aware this is a thing, know that it's there, and maybe try to avoid letting yourself die to something like killing a rat by accident, because that would just not be a fun way to go. That's it for today then, everyone. The news from the last few days for Diablo 4. We've of course got the developer stream coming up in a couple of days, and I will be covering that as soon as I can afterwards to get you all the important points of info that we learned as soon as we can. So look forward to that. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.